The question is, what is it that stops us making music in our daily lives? Because if you have a life outside of music, if you're not like a full-time musician, then what can happen is that the music part of it kind of shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And then you stop doing it for a few days and then you kind of lose the thread and then you're no longer doing it, right? And life has kind of taken over. And this has happened to me a lot this year for good reasons, but also I think for some not so good reasons. You know, in this situation, I've kind of said to myself, I'm just not feeling motivated to make music, or maybe I don't have time today, or I don't have time this week, or I'm just too busy. I mean, it's very frustrating because I know that I want to make music. It's not that I want to make it. It's not that I think, oh, I want to give up. This isn't for me. It's not that. It's just that music has become this thing that I kind of need to get myself to do. This music is this thing that I need to sort of think about doing and pick up again. The problem is with these things, I'm not motivated, I don't have time, I'm too busy, is that I don't know if you've noticed, but in exactly the same situation, there's nothing different about your life. It's sometimes more like music is part of your life. It's kind of front and center in your life. While there are all these other things going on, you are motivated, you're not too busy, and time shows up. Right? You're in this situation where you're just doing it. And there's nothing actually different between the times when, I mean, occasionally there is, if you have a life crisis or something like that, fair enough, that's a different situation. But under normal circumstances, I have noticed there are some times when music seems to be distant from me and I'm struggling to do it. And then there are other times, same life situation, where it is front and center. Yeah, time just shows up. In other words, music is a priority. And what I have realized in the course of making the album that I'm making right now is that what it's about is one word, is simply clarity. So what does clarity mean? Well, clarity is about clarity of what you are doing in your music. So the problem isn't the life part, because as we've already said, on the one hand, sometimes you're in the same life and music is far away. And in exactly the same situation, sometimes music is front and center. So what is the difference? What the difference is, at the times when music is front and center, you are clear on what you are supposed to be doing, when you're supposed to be doing it, and why you are doing it, right? Because then you don't need to make any decisions before doing it. You just know, all right, I'm doing this. Right. And that's what the music machine helps you do. You can literally just go to the piece and go, all right, here's what I'm supposed to be doing. However, in terms of your daily schedule, in terms of your actual life, when you are doing those sessions and what sessions you are doing, of course, that is going to require something slightly more that is telling you when you're doing the sessions, right? So what I have done, which has really changed my ability to do these sessions, because I've gone from, during the drafting challenge, so last month, really struggling to, I mean, I did it in the end. I did 51, in fact, drafting sessions. I did it in the end, but I was really struggling to do it at all, to now, and I'm just doing it. How I'm keeping it front and center is by essentially identifying on a daily basis, what do I need to do? So in other words, how I'm doing that is by creating daily targets, daily session targets. The thing is, when my life was less complicated, when I had less uncertainty about what was going to go on, what was going to happen in my life, this was easier. It was like, oh, I'm going to do this number of sessions a day. Thing is, I think I was just in a very lucky situation for a while there where I had more space to do things. Now I've got a much more complicated schedule. Okay. So what I've now done is figured out on what days do I need to do what daily targets. So I'm calling that the weekly beat. Of course, if things change, if my schedule significantly changes, then I will change that weekly beat. And what's really important as well is, and this was in place anyway, but it's absolutely essential. Why am I doing it? Right? In other words, towards monthly milestones. Okay, so the bit that was missing for me was the weekly beat, right? When exactly do I need to fulfill what daily targets? Because the monthly milestones, I knew I had to do a drafting challenge. And in fact, it was the drafting challenge, the monthly milestone, that got me to do it in the first place. If I hadn't have had an album I was working towards and the monthly milestones I was working towards, I probably would have fallen off, and I would still have fallen off making music. So the monthly milestones absolutely are an essential part of it, right? Because I know that those monthly milestones are going to motivate me to do these sessions. Because I know, right, I'm finishing a drafting challenge in order to be able to finish an album. I'm finishing an album in order to improve as a singer, as a songwriter. I know why I'm doing it. Those monthly milestones are the why. They're tied to the reason that I'm doing all of these things. Because a month is something that you can figure out in your head. You know what I mean? You can work towards something. Okay, it's not that far away. The largest it ever is about 4 weeks away. That's not too far. Right? But in terms of your daily life, a month away, it doesn't kind of make sense. It kind of kicks in at the very end, right? So what you want is this weekly beat. Yeah. But even a weekly thing can be a bit like, I'm struggling to understand what's going on. So if you have a daily target, right, which is going towards that week, now I understand. Today, I need to do 5 sessions. I haven't done any yet, right? So I need to do 5. So this is how I run it. I've got this app called Streaks, and I've set it up so that I check off my sessions. So I meditate every day. I read like a course book about basically developing my voice called Complete Vocal Technique. So I read this app every day for 5 minutes. I do it's just a 5-minute singing game where I'm using this different way of singing. I'm using my voice. I'm not going more. I'm singing in a different way. So it's a practice that I do. Then I have, as I said, on Monday and Tuesday, actually, 2 album sessions. On Wednesday, 5 album sessions. So this was on Wednesday. And then on, on Monday, Tuesday, 2 albums, because it comes up automatically. So me not being able to say this is why I use an app, right? Because it just comes up automatically. These ones are faded out because it's not the right day, right? So it just tells me, you can see here that they're basically broken up. So 2 album sessions on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, 5 album sessions on Thursdays and Fridays, and 10 album sessions on Saturdays and Sundays. And I literally just check them off. Okay. That creates a little bit of a dopamine hit that, as you know, once I get to 3 album sessions, I'm like, I have to do 2 to close the circle. Right. So basically by doing that, I've gone from the big goal, finishing an album, to the monthly milestone, to the weekly beat, right? To the daily target. And that is meaning I don't have to think about anything. I just do it. And that is the ideal situation you want to be, to keep your music front and center in your life. Procrastination is 80%, maybe more than that, about not being clear on what you are doing, when you're doing it, and why.